Welcome to the Better with Age podcast. I am Leah Wetzel, licensed nutritionist and certified nutrition specialist. Today's guest is Susan Isom. Susan is a neuroscience coach and a certified practitioner of the MAP method, a gentle and effective brain retraining technique. After facing her own challenges with chronic health issues and perimenopause, Susan discovered that unprocessed childhood trauma was still affecting her body and mind. As she began working with the MAP method at a subconscious level, her emotional, mental, and physical health steadily transformed. That experience led her to becoming certified in the method, and now she helps others break free from anxiety, overthinking, emotional overwhelm, and other stuck patterns that hold them back. Whether it is limiting belief, a reoccurring fear, or a habit that no longer serves them, Susan helps people move forward with clarity, confidence, and peace. You can learn more at her website, mindbodyharmonyandhealth.com. Welcome, Susan, to the Better with Age podcast today. I'm so happy to have you here. I was very excited when you were willing to come on the show. I think your line of work is so fascinating. I'm really excited to share with our audience today. Tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into this field, your journey to that, your background.
Yes. Well, thank you, Leah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. So my journey with this work started about 10 plus years ago in terms of my story. I was struggling with chronic illness. And for anybody that's gone down that road, they know there are lots of labels out there, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, Lyme, mold, you name it, MCAS. And I collected a lot of labels and I tried a lot of different diets and protocols, modalities, and nothing was really moving the needle. And I got to a point where I realized that my body was holding on to old trauma and old stress. It was stored in my body, and that was manifesting itself in these physical symptoms. And so I got to that point where I knew that, but I still didn't know how to get rid of it. So then I was on a quest to find out how to get rid of it. And I tried a few things, and some things worked a little bit, but not totally. And I kind of almost got to the point where I gave up. Um, I'm a researcher by nature. I have an engineering background, so I was always really trying to find the root of the problem. And I was exhausted, well, physically, but I was also exhausted mentally trying to find the answers. And I felt like there was no more answers out there. I didn't know where else to go. Financially, I had spent a lot of money over the years and I was ready to give up. And then all of a sudden I came across MAP. And so I always say it was a godsend for me because it totally it totally changed me. It was the only thing I found that really worked at the subconscious level to gently and easily reduce and neutralize all of this trauma. I had a very traumatic childhood. So, some might call it, well, it was chronic trauma or complex trauma. And I knew that. And I had tried to work with that throughout the years, again, not really achieving any success. But MAP was the only thing that started to touch that.
Wow.
And it started to affect my life, my just how I showed up in life in such a profound way. And, other people could notice. My husband certainly noticed, but friends, even that I hadn't talked to in a while, they were like, "What's different with you? You're different." And it was so powerful. I was like, I need to become certified in this so that I can share this with the world and help other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you going through this journey and discovering MAP and kind of working on those subconscious traumas, like really helped to evolve your physical health, you would say.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we always say that the physical changes are going to come last, right? First, we work with mental and emotional changes, and you see
Sure.
those improvements first. But what that does is that releases all that stress so that your body can then heal. It releases that subconscious stress, the stress that we're not even aware of, because our bodies are designed to heal, right? Like if we get a cold, we heal, or the flu, we heal. But if there's something chronic going on, especially these mystery things that nobody can really help you with, that's a clue that there's something blocking your healing,
Mm.
right? And so for me, I realized that was subconscious stress or the stored trauma, whatever you want to call it. And this is the method I use to get in there and work with that.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. What is MAP? What is the MAP method and how does it work?
Well, the MAP stands for Make Anything Possible, and it's a neuroscience-based method, and it works with our subconscious, where we store emotional memories and all the associations, and it works to rewire your brain so that you can overcome whatever your issue is that you want to overcome, whether it's stress or anxiety, past trauma, a negative memory, mindset blocks, limiting beliefs, right? We all have some limiting belief somewhere, triggers or habits that we want to break, self-sabotaging behaviors, basically anything that you are aware of that you don't want, MAP can help you with. And then once these things are kind of cleared, we can even use MAP to reach our goals, which is very fun. Those are really fun sessions because what we're doing is we're neutralizing any subconscious stress, any subconscious resistance to meeting those goals. And so then it becomes very easy to walk out your goals. Let's say somebody wants to write a book and there's many steps involved, right? And let's say they feel really good about most of the steps, but for some reason they just can't get started and they're really excited, they just can't get started.
Yep.
So by going into the session and exploring this, we would, in this example, list out all the steps, and then we call it map, we would map on any resistance in each of those steps.
Ah,
And
okay.
I did do that early on with a client, and I'd have to look at my notes, but it was very fun, very exciting. We found resistance in a step that she had no idea she had resistance on. And then once that was cleared, she was all ready to go.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. So, what kind of clients do you work with and what kind of issues can MAP improve?
Well, I've worked with all ages, from college age to seniors, worked with men and women, worked with a lot of different issues. So we've worked with phobias. Those are really fun and easy typically to treat. Phobias of like a phobia of heights or animals, anxiety, overwhelm, brain fog, exhaustion, grief. Like I mentioned, limiting beliefs or negative self-talk, trauma, any kind of issues with food, behaviors that we don't want or habits, self-confidence. And then, especially for women, some big ones are boundaries, people pleasing, perfectionism, fear of failure, even fear of success. Basically, anything that somebody's aware of that they want to clear.
Yeah. So, like all those things that you named, like that pretty much sums up everybody. You know, I don't know. The more I learn about MAP, I just think there's just so many touch points in life where I think this could be such a valuable tool. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really exciting. And so where are you focusing now in your work?
Well, now most of my clients are women in midlife, kind of in that perimenopausal phase. And, a lot of times there's so much going on in the stage of life. Um, and that can cause women to feel like they're kind of unraveling or emotionally they're not themselves. And they can be dealing with one or more of the things that we just mentioned, the things that MAP can help. They're typically self-aware, right? You need to be able to come, if you're coming to a MAP session, you're aware of something that you want to change. They don't have to be super self-aware. So I don't want to anyone to think that. But just, you know what? This triggers me, or this I've had this in the past and I can't seem to get over it, whatever it is, or like I said, a pattern or behavior. But in this perimenopause stage and age, women have several things happening. Obviously, our hormones are changing, and that affects us. Our bodies are physically changing, and nobody really likes that.
Right.
And oftentimes during this stage, our life circumstances can be changing or about to change. So you think of moms that have kids that are either getting ready to leave the nest or they've already left. Um, and if they're married, they can be looking at their husband like, okay, who are you? I have to figure out marriage and navigate this marriage, and it feels very different with the kids gone, right? They can also start to deal with aging parents and all of
Mhm.
the issues that come with that. And so there's a lot going on. All these things can be happening. And then if they're working outside the home, um, I hear a lot too, people that are working in the corporate world, for instance, they're not able, because of the hormonal changes and the body changes, they feel like they're not able to show up in their jobs the way that they used to. And
Yes.
that's really disheartening and it makes them feel incapable and I don't think I can do this. All these beliefs come up. And along with that, really a sense of loss of what we used to be. And there's sometimes loss of relationships. And just that loss of identity, really, as life changes and shifts.
Yes, yes. This is also an area in my practice. This is where I often find women are interested in starting to explore, like, hey, this isn't working. Like, I need to shift something to help support my health. Whether what I work with is around nutrition, but often like body composition change, hormonal regulation. But a big piece is stress and anxiety, and lack of sleep. A lot of nervous system relationships, because that's a very common thing with this transitional period and perimenopause where our nervous system becomes more sensitive. And it's easier for these past memories or current situations to become more trigger points, I feel like. So yeah, that's awesome. I think that working on that piece, the subconscious level, um, and ultimately, as you know, and I'll share later, my experience with this too is that it definitely seems to like provide a layer of support and calming to the nervous system. It's so like super cool. So with this and what I see in practice, and a question I've been harboring for you is, in my practice, I work in integrative functional nutrition. People come to me often knowing a lot, right? Knowing a lot about nutrition, knowing all the ins and outs, things that they quote unquote should be doing, right, for their health, but really struggle with the implementation or staying consistent with that self-care. I see a lot of roadblocks around emotional eating, cravings, sabotaging behavior around food. And for me, knowing a little bit more about the how much of the subconscious drives the ship, right, of what we do,
Yeah.
like 90, was it 95% of
Yeah.
what we do in day out is subconsciously driven, and only like 5% is our, conscious willpower. So I see this in my practice. How do these subconscious beliefs contribute to these patterns, do you believe?
Well, I think when someone struggles with any kind of food issues or any kind of self-sabotaging behaviors, it's really rarely about a lack of discipline. I mean, obviously sometimes it is, but if you're at a
Yeah.
point, they're working with you or somebody like you, they're ready to change. They want to change, and for whatever reason, they can't seem to change or can't seem to sustain change. And so what's really going on is that the subconscious brain has linked food to something else, right? Oftentimes emotional safety. And from a neuroscience perspective, the mind is always scanning for either threat or safety. So, for example, if someone grew up in an environment where emotions were not validated or where love came inconsistently or maybe hardly at all, the brain may have learned things like, food is the only thing that comforts me.
Hmm.
Or if they were lonely as a child, maybe eating is how I can soothe myself and make myself not feel so lonely. We can attach all kinds of beliefs to food. And again, not consciously, especially as a child, right? But but that wiring, that programming, so to speak, is happening. And we can also see protective beliefs, like especially if there's a trauma history, we can see things like, we can uncover. Again, women may not be aware of this, but when we kind of explore this topic, they can realize, oh, I guess if I lose weight, I'm afraid that I'll be more visible. And that feels scary to me and that doesn't feel
Yes.
safe. And again, that's typically with a trauma history or even just, we pick up things as children, right? We believe everything to be true up until the age of about 7. And
Yep.
so if somebody made a comment about our appearance or our body or food even, or we watched somebody else struggle with food issues. I mean, all of these things are sinking in and getting programmed into our brain, into our subconscious. Um, and so it's not really self-sabotage, it's self-protection because our brain is always going to try to keep us safe and help us to survive. And so if it thinks that being visible is not safe, it's going to work against us in that example, losing weight, right?
I love that. I love that take on that. That it's very true. We're just always trying to protect ourselves,
Hmm. Hmm.
primally, right? In different ways.
Yes,
And that's when you talk about that 0 to 7. I mean, that's an early life, like our conscious and our subconscious are, there's no barrier there, right? So a lot of things that our perceived realities really seem ring true can get hardwired at that
absolutely.
early stage. Yes.
Absolutely. And it's
Yes.
not about blaming our parents or blaming anyone.
Oh, right.
It's just a fact, right? Like whatever we experience and hear and observe, we accept as complete truth, up until about age 7, like we said. So it's nobody's fault per se. It's just this is how our brains are, and these patterns and beliefs will stay with us the rest of our lives unless we address those.
Right. And this is a method, like,
Yes.
that can be very supportive for that, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's so
Absolutely.
cool. That's so cool. Because I've been in practice now for over 15 years, and I see this pattern time and time again. And, definitely people can make progress and health gains, right, with the work that we do together. But on the back of my brain, I'm like, there's another layer here that we kind of need to fully keep this momentum going long term without
Yes.
having these, hills and valleys of something gets in the way, this trigger response gets in the way, we get off track with the eating, you know, get back on track, life intervenes again. But to really help to disassociate the memory from the
Mhm.
food, I think amazing.
Well, and I think you hit on a key thing. When life feels hard, whether it really is hard or at that moment or it just feels hard, emotionally hard, that's when we revert very quickly to those old subconscious ways, those patterns, those beliefs. And so that's exactly right.
Yes, yes. So going into this, because there may be things that where our body is harboring, like we talked about the early life traumas potentially, or life experiences
Hmm.
that maybe are dictating our adult patterning. Um, do we have to know them? Do your clients have to know the traumas and the roots of the issues in order for MAP to work?
Great question. So the answer is no. And that's one of the reasons that map is so gentle. Um, the brain can resolve emotional patterns without really needing for you to consciously remember them. And excuse me, there's no way that we can remember everything negative that happened to us or was said to us or that we witnessed, right? So we don't need the client to relive painful events by talking about them in detail if they know about them. Obviously, some people know about them, right? Maybe they were
Yeah.
assaulted, maybe they were in an accident, whatever. Obviously, we can use those and work with those. But if they just feel like, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know why, or nothing I can do, seems to work to stay on my protocol or my plan or whatever, we can work with that because our entry point is our beliefs and our emotions around the subject, whatever your subject is. And that's what we use for kind of the gateway, I call it. And we get in and we start working with the mind, and your mind knows what needs to be healed. I don't need to know. And you actually don't need to know. We don't want to sit there and logically parse out what needs to happen or diagnose. We just let your subconscious do the work.
Yeah, I mean, that I would say is exactly my experience working with you. Susan walked me through a session, and it was so fascinating to me. The outcomes. It was a few weeks ago. What I
Yeah.
don't can't remember what it was. And we just in this particular session, it was more of an introduction session where we were just focusing on one particular memory. And when she, kind of gave me the description of what I should focus on in this session, I knew right away the memory that I wanted to focus on. A childhood memory wasn't so great, but it's kind of stuck in my brain all the 40, almost 40 years, right? And never told you what it was, right?
Mhm.
Just told you the emotions around it, kind of the general sense of maybe age. I can't remember if I should round what age I was. But something that I've hung on to, and there was a definitely emotional tie for me for many years. And we worked on that it was like an hour, was it
Yep.
about an
Yep.
hour? And it's I mean, amazing how something that was so vivid and had such a strong emotion for me now, I mean, 3 weeks out, I will say, right? Um, Seems so far distant. Like the
Wonderful.
emotional connection to this, and also even the memory is fuzzy, where it was so vivid and strong in my brain and would elicit this re emotional response, no longer has. It was quite, quite a remarkable change with that. I've, touched on this in other sort of therapies, but um, hadn't really changed the dynamic. And I didn't have to even tell you what it was, which is
That's right.
amazing.
That's right. And even though I do this work, it's still amazing to me that, you don't even have to tell me what you're working on and it still works. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll just mention here too that, some people will say they'll come to me and they want to work on something. They're not quite sure what, they're just kind of feeling stuck. And I'll just say to them, well, is there any memory that kind of pops up from maybe years ago or even decades ago? I'm not saying it pops up every day, but if it pops up every now and then, that's your subconscious telling you, hey, knock, knock, this isn't processed yet. This is still affecting you today. And so if you still think about, Sally Sue, who bullied you on the playground in third grade, every now and then, again, not every day, but if that memory keeps popping up, that means that it's affecting your life in some way that you most likely don't even understand or realize. And that's what we can go in there and take care of those memories.
Yeah, and I would say, because you also told me to just lightly pay attention to other maybe connecting factors, or just changes that I would notice maybe in my behavior, or
Yeah.
how I feeling after the math of our session. And I would say, after the last 3 weeks or so, I mean, I've been feeling pretty good. Well, I generally do, which is good, but I had made a connection to another family member from this my own childhood memory with no association, right? There's no
Yep.
association at all. But I feel like the things that I was more reacted to responding to that person is has been better, which is really interesting, right?
Wonderful.
Right. And the other thing I'll just say is, as a health metric, I have an aura ring. Do you have an aura?
Hmm.
So just track health measures and HRV. Have you ever heard of heart rate
Yep.
variability? Yeah. So that's like kind of a measurement of like your stress resilience, how your body recovers. It's been pretty consistently up by 10 points since last few weeks, which I thought that was really interesting.
Wow.
And that, I mean, other than we're getting into a nice time of year, which there can be that like shift a little bit, but not usually that much of a shift. Um, so I thought that's really curious that like my body's resilience and stress balance seems a little better overall. So,
That's that's wonderful. That's
yeah.
amazing. That's
But it's
amazing.
so weird that like something that happened to me at 8
Yeah.
is could that there's can be these like layers with that.
Absolutely. And I'll say too, I also say this to my clients that um or I explain that our memories are stored with an associated emotion or emotions, right? And the more intense those emotions are, the more prominence our brain gives that memory.
Ah, okay.
So, for example, if you can think of, let's just pick a positive day in your past, maybe it was your wedding or the birth of a child or graduation or vacation, whatever it is, think of a really great day. And even if it was decades ago, you can probably still remember very specific details of that day, right? But if I asked you what you had for lunch 17 days ago,
Right.
nobody remember, unless you eat exactly the same thing, which I don't recommend, but nobody remembers that. Why? Is that a memory that what you had for lunch? Yes, absolutely, that's a memory because that was an experience in your life, but there's no emotional charge to it. So the reason, again, that you remember those details from those special days decades ago is because there was such an emotional intensity associated with it. So you can think of now, flip it, if it was a negative
Hmm.
experience, like what you dealt with, whatever it was, whatever your memory was, there was a high charge, high emotional charge to that. And so our brain gives those memories priority, so to speak, and our brain continually uses those memories to shape our behavior in our present day. And so let's get rid of all those negatively emotionally charged memories so that we can show up the way we want to show up.
Yes, please. That's great. Yes. So when I try to explain MAP or subconscious reprogramming to patients, a lot of them will say, "Well, I've gone through trauma therapy. I've done talk therapy or EMDR or cognitive behavior therapy, and it just doesn't work for me." Like, how is MAP different from those other types of, maybe trauma-based therapy cares?
Yes, great question. And I also have tried many of those over the years as
Okay.
well. So MAP's unique because it harnesses the power of the subconscious mind. As you mentioned, that's like 95% of our brain and runs our life to bring about that change that we want in our present life. So, for example, traditional talk therapy, it can provide valuable insights and teach us ways to cope, for example, but it primarily engages our conscious mind, right? Because we're talking. And this often means that patterns are going to simply persist subconsciously, even after years of discussion. And I know that personally. Um, and furthermore, I believe that the more we talk about something, the stronger we're making those neural pathways, right? I mean, I think science proves that too.
Mhm.
So we want the opposite. We want to weaken those neural pathways of all those negative emotions, beliefs, whatever it is. And then EMDR, I've done that as well, and that did work for one specific thing that I went in. It was very specific. So that can work for a lot of people with for trauma processing, but it typically requires that you have to consciously revisit or kind of re-experience in your mind these distressing memories. And I, for one, found that pretty challenging and intense. Um, did it work? Yes, it did work for that very specific thing. But the thing with the difference between EMDR and MAP is that, well, we don't have to you can attest to this. You don't have to sit there and really relive that in your mind, so to
Right.
speak. You don't have to focus on it. You're simply relaxing and observing what's happening in your mind. And then the other major difference is EMDR typically focuses on one specific thing at a time, whereas MAP is going to work on your one thing plus anything associated with it. And so it becomes very efficient. And then CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that can emphasize changing our behaviors through our conscious effort, again, our conscious effort, and through changing our thoughts. But here we are, we know that subconscious runs the show. And so we need to really work with the subconscious um, to make change, to make lasting change. So I think the map is wonderful because it goes to the root and it works with those clusters of associated memories. Even, memories that we're not aware of. There's no way we could possibly be aware of all these associations.
Right, right, exactly. I think of it almost like when I think of the map in the context of the subconscious, like the web of
Yeah.
those memory connections and how working on this amazing, like working on one could diffuse many.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. And I will just speak to that myself because, um, when I first started going through my map sessions, I was seeing changes in my life. I was seeing changes in my relationships. Like my marriage felt like it improved, but we never even worked on my marriage as a map session topic.
Wow.
So why did that relationship improve? Because I was showing up differently, right? I was showing up more emotionally regulated. I was showing up not being triggered by whatever I was triggered by. And so yes, exactly. I like how you said that the web, right? That web, everything is associated and we don't have to know why, but it is. And we
Yep.
don't have to know what is associated with what. It just simply like things just start to fall away. The things that you don't like, they simply start to fall away.
Yeah, that's great. So what sort of advice do you have for a practitioner like myself when I'm noticing these stuck patterns, around obviously my wheelhouse is nutrition or self-care in general, because this can also be like how much sleep we're getting, how much exercise we're doing, how much hydration. With all this, really like again, I feel like we're spinning our wheels. Like, how can a collaboration like with a practitioner like you benefit my patients when I'm noticing these patterns?
Yeah, great question. Exactly to what you said. Your client, you may notice that your clients, your patients are stuck, right? Or they can't seem to have lasting change. And so that's a sign that it's not a willpower issue.
Right.
It's a subconscious, like we've been talking about. So the brain is linking food to something, to safety or identity or love or connection or something else. And so that's where collaboration can be really powerful because you're addressing the body, and with MAP, I address the mind. And we're trying to change those deeper emotional responses. And so what I do doesn't replace what you do or vice versa, but we just together support both the body and mind so that the client and the patient can have lasting change.
Yes, that's always my key is like whatever we tackle for our goal setting is like is something that I want you to be able to be consistent and keep doing, right?
Right.
That's where we heal the body.
Yes.
And so to be able to achieve that, I think for, a lot of people, because, and even our society as a whole, it's kind of like these all or nothing where they're into the restriction 12-week protocol or we're off the rails, right? Like I see this time and time again, and that's just not where we can be sustainable.
Right.
But to allow for our body, our subconscious, or, to together to cooperate
Hmm.
so we can keep doing the things that keep our bodies feeling good and healthy, I think is huge.
And that's exactly right. And this is such a simplistic example, but I think this speaks to exactly what you're talking about. We talk about parts, if anyone is familiar with the internal family systems and the different aspects of our personality. So if one part of us wants a cookie and one part wants to be healthy, these parts are in conflict with each other, right? So maybe our conscious mind wants to be healthy, but these parts from childhood perhaps want the cookie for whatever reason. And so with MAP, we can neutralize the emotions from that part that wants the cookie and get everybody on the same board, right? Like, let's all move in the same direction to the same goal. So we're getting rid of the resistance. So that's exactly right.
Right, right. It's not about never having the cookie, right? Like it's
Right,
fine, right? It's
right.
just if that cookie pattern like leads to that continual unfortunate behavior patterns that keep us off track, right?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. And then we can spiral with our thoughts, right?
Right.
Well, I fell off the protocol, so I might as well have 10 cookies, or I might as well, whatever, or I can never do anything right, or, all these negative beliefs. And then we start to just live those out and reinforce those.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So to let people know, like what does a private session, a one-on-one map session, what does it look like?
Well, we start by talking about what you want to focus on for that session, and usually about 10 to 15 minutes. Um, and I'm taking notes and asking questions, just asking you to gently explore this and again, asking some pointed questions. And it's not really for my benefit, although I am taking notes. It's really for the client's benefit to have the client fully explore and trigger all of these subconscious thoughts, behaviors, patterns, memories into their what we call active experience, what they can really experience right now. Now, having said that, there's the clients, in your session was an example of where you didn't tell me exactly what. So I just ask questions like, okay, what do you want to call this? A childhood memory? Okay, let's call it a childhood memory. What are the emotions? So we can explore it that way. I don't need to know exactly. I'm just looking for language that I can use throughout the session, right, to trigger your memory. Um, and I don't even remember what your emotions were, but just for example, if somebody told me fear, and as we go throughout the session, I would say, okay, is there anything else besides that fear? Do you still notice the fear? Things like that. So the first 10 to 15 minutes is really the client exploring what they want to work on, either out loud with me or in their own mind. And again, it can be any of these issues like we talked about before. And then I will invite the client to get in a relaxed position. And they know ahead of time that this is mostly an eyes closed process,
Mhm.
a relaxed process. You're not, hypnotized, you're not meditating, you're just very relaxed. And so I guide the client just with some simple breathing exercises, letting your brain and your nervous system know that you're safe, and maybe some grounding exercises. And then we get into the session. And your job as a client is not to logically think. It's not to make connections. It's not to, take notes or anything like that. Your job is simply to observe, just to notice what's bubbling up in your mind. Um, and that's really all it is. And so in that respect, clients find it typically very calming and very relaxing, and very gentle. Sometimes people even fall asleep, which is
Mhm.
totally fine because their subconscious is still hearing my voice and it's still doing the work, right? And so I don't know if that speaks to your experience.
Yeah, for sure. I lay down because I just
Yep.
whenever I do some sort of practice like this, I just do better like meditation, breath work, in a laid down state versus trying to find that comfortable seated position. Then I'm focusing more on that than just trying to totally let go. So I lay down on a very grounding, like I have this nice rug that I lay down on. And I was totally, I don't know if I fell asleep. I don't think I felt, maybe I did. I don't think I fell asleep, but I was totally relaxed and really focusing on just kind of clearing my mind and just being present was what I was trying to do. And it was really calming, right? I wasn't
Yeah.
stressed. I wasn't like reliving this memory. It felt like, again, like through this hour window, like we were doing all these things that was diffusing the emotion around this strong memory that I had. And it was really at one point, because I don't know if you were describing like being putting it into a bubble. I like the whole
Mhm.
memory went into this like it like separated from me into this
Yeah.
bubble
Yes.
in my mind, in my vision, and it just kind of moved away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it hasn't
Yeah.
come back, so that's
That's
good.
awesome. Yeah. And sometimes I use that metaphor with clients, especially if there are a lot of things coming up, or if there's just, oh, this and that, they just continually, those are usually, oral processors. They're
Yeah,
talking a lot and lots of things are coming. And I say, okay, let's just put this all in a bubble. So, it's separate, right? Or you can even think of it putting on a TV screen, in your mind, right? You're separating from it and you're just containing all of that. And I will just say also during the session, I'm giving instructions to your subconscious. And so, when I say people fall asleep, or sometimes they say they zone out, they're just passively listening to my voice. And
yeah,
then I'll check in with the client a few times throughout the session, like, hey, Leah, if you want, when you're ready, gently focus on what you came here to work on and how does it feel now? And that's how we do the session.
yeah, yeah. It was definitely felt that like just felt so zoned out, but like you would pull me back in certain to kind of reflect on where I was with that, it
Yeah,
seemed like. So
exactly.
it was super
Exactly.
cool. That was the most relaxing, calming therapy session I'd ever experienced, you know,
Yay.
right?
I love
In
it.
in my experience, but
Yeah.
that's great. Well, so also you do group, like what does a group session look like?
Yes, I'm glad you asked because a lot of people I think are kind of scared off when they hear group because they think I don't want to tell all these strangers all my
Yeah.
personal issues or what I'm working on. And that's actually not what it is at all. And so a group session usually focuses on a shared theme, right? Like it could be perfectionism or something around food or a belief, whatever it is. And when you come to a group session, all my work is done on Zoom, so it's all online. And there'll be like a first 5 minutes of a Q&A, and that's usually logistical questions, making sure people know where the chat box is, and making sure people know um, if they have a question on, oh, hey, can I work on this? And I'll say yes or no or whatever. So that's kind of it. And then, but you don't have to ask a question, obviously. And then we start the session. And again, they're in a relaxed position, they're in a safe place, and we go through the session, and all of the clients' microphones are on mute. So nobody is telling me what they're working on, right? And the only thing I ask for is that intensity rating. So in MAP, we use this scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is neutral, 10 is a high level of intensity. And so in the beginning, as we're first getting started, I'll ask people to put in the chat box their number. So that's all they have to do. Just put, and usually it's between a 6 and a 10 in terms of intensity of what they're trying to get rid of or heal or treat. And and then I may ask them halfway through, what's your number now? And then of course at the end. And so we can see and they can see how they're progressing through the session. And then at the end of the session, they are welcome to simply leave the Zoom room, or they could stay for an optional Q&A or debriefing at the end. It's really fun. Even if you don't want to speak, it's fun to hear what other people's experiences are through this.
Yes.
So all that to say, it's very private in terms of you don't have to share anything. It's definitely more affordable than a one-on-one session, and it's surprisingly deep. So when I started doing group sessions, I had some of my one-on-one clients, they came to my group sessions and they were amazed at how, because they had experienced both. They were amazed at how powerful the group session was. And we typically say group sessions are for progress on your topic, not necessarily completion, because again, it's group, it's not individualized. However, I mean, many times people go, their intensity comes down, to a 1 or a 0, and that's amazing.
That is amazing. That's awesome. Yes, I love that. Again, obviously I'm focusing, there's so more complexity to this than food, but I'm just thinking about this in this context for patients that just want to work on this like behavioral pattern that they have around food, like how group sessions would be awesome to get them at least figure like to get an idea around this, and there's more opportunities to go individually too from there,
Right,
but
right.
yeah, that's awesome. That's a really great offering to reach more people. And I agree around some of this in other realms. Like again, I'm relating to like breath work or meditation or yoga, where like being with others, even if we're not exactly in the same room together, like that can be a really healing aspect too, and hearing other people's experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, we don't need to understand exactly how that works or why that works. It just does.
Yes, yeah. So what like in your experience, what sort of results do like clients experience? I know I shared my example, but what other like in a session, like what are things that you will maybe commonly hear as outcomes?
Well, typically at the end of a session, a client's, intensity has come down noticeably, right? Um, Most people report that they feel very calm and relaxed. They feel lighter, and not just emotionally lighter. I experienced this after my first session, my intro session. I was wa taking a walk the next day and talking to a friend on the telephone, and I'm trying to explain to her how I feel lighter. And she's like, "Oh yeah, you feel emotionally light." I'm like, "No, it's not just that. Like I literally feel like I took off a 50-pound backpack. Like there's a spring in my step. I feel physically lighter." It was so hard to explain. So I do hear that a lot. I hear that, as you said, the memory feels maybe fuzzy or distant or far away. Or some people describe it, it looks black and white. I don't really see it. It's not so vivid anymore. Um, I had a client yesterday that she said, I always ask for an update when I see the client again. And she said, that last session, and I think what we worked on was a relationship issue.
Mm.
And it wasn't one of her, I would say, primary relationships, but it was a relationship issue. And she was hurt. And we worked on that. And at the end of the session, she had told me, because I make notes, and she said, "I am so calm and so quiet. My mind is so quiet." And so when I saw her recently, she said, that was the most quietest my mind has ever been in my entire life.
Wow.
She said, "I keep going back and remembering that." And that was pretty crazy. And then another client, who's actually a new client, she only had an intro session. And we worked on, similarly, we worked on a relationship thing with a friend. And so my client was feeling hurt, right? And angry. And when I saw her for her second session, she said, "I made a lunch date with this friend, and I calmly told her my how I experienced the situation, and I told her my feelings, and I was very calm, and she heard me, and she apologized, and the relationship was restored." Now, not to say that MAP is going to restore every relationship in your life. I'm not saying that, but you can imagine if a person shows up to a difficult situation in a very calm and emotionally regulated state, the other party is going to receive that much better than if that person showed up crying or yelling. And that's what my client said. She said, "Before MAP, I've been holding on to this. It's been festering, and I was thinking I was never going to let it go," is what she said.
Ah,
And so she showed up very calm, no crying, no yelling. And this is the work that MAP does to help us show up very, um, emotionally regulated in our life. It's going to affect everything, right? It's going to affect every relationship. It's going to affect our self-talk, our relationship with ourself. Um, and that's the beautiful work that it does.
that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like we talked about earlier, like how much that then can snowball in so many different avenues beyond that situation that they were addressing.
Exactly.
That's so cool. So, where can people find more about you? How can, you know, clients find you? What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, well, the best way is to visit my website, and that address is mindbodyharmonyandhealth.com. And like we mentioned, I offer private one-on-one MAP sessions and group sessions. And I also have a lot of resources there to help you learn more about MAP. If you're a science person, you want to learn more about the science, there's videos there that you can watch. And I have an extensive FAQ section. And then I also offer a free call. If people have gone through all that information, they still have questions, then just set up a call.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today. I find this work super fascinating, and I'm so excited to collaborate with you personally. I want to explore more of this in my own life, but also to send patients your way. I definitely think partnerships is great.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Leah. And I do look forward to working with you in the
Yeah.
future.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Better with Age podcast. If you're interested in learning more about Susan Isom's work and more about the MAP method, please check out her website at mindbodyharmonyandhealth.com. If you're interested in learning more about the Better with Age, the Better with Age is a great online longevity program that Galen and I put together to really help people leverage and to enjoy their life fully with strength, energy, and confidence. Our website is betterwithage.online. Our program is an online comprehensive education of support for your fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle changes to really invest in your health. And so you are able to live your life and experience things in the way you are wanting with vitality and overall well-being. Thank you for listening all the way to the end today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.